Welcome back, everybody. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Sylvester Inspires Belief Cast. I am so excited to have Heidi Swapp on today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You betcha. I'm so excited for you guys to get to know her and her amazing story and the way she lives her life and the things and the challenges she's been through. I do have to say once again, shout out to our sponsor, Veracity Networks. They're a telecommunication company that believes in helping the community. They've been so good to me, and they're helping get the word out too as well with all these belief casts. And I'm so blessed that they are supporting this. And so it's really going to help obviously get the message out, especially with Heidi's story. So that's going to be awesome. So
that's great.
Thank you, Veracity Networks, right? So a little background on Heidi. Heidi Swapp is a storyteller, craft, and decor designer, creative instructor, author, and a speaker who firmly believes that life doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. We'll get more into that, but I love how you say that. That's beautiful. Her favorite job is a wife and a mother to 5 children. They range in ages from elementary school to young adult. She started connecting with audiences worldwide back in 2000 through scrapbooking magazines and events, and later sharing her passion through the memory for her. Sorry, I said that completely wrong. Later sharing her passion for memory keeping through blogging, social media, and her signature line of creative products. Sorry, that was a tongue twister for me.
Well, I designed it so that it was really hard to read. Just kidding.
No, but I'm excited to talk about that. I mean, she's very successful in her business, and she's got hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, which is really cool. There was a tragedy in her life. Her son Cory took his life back in 2015 at age 16. We're going to talk about how she dealt with that and what she's doing with that today. That unbearable ordeal has caused her to connect and to be an advocate for suicide prevention through community events. And she has a podcast called Light the Fight. Is that how you say that?
Yep. Which
is really cool as well. And we'll get more into how to get a hold of Heidi after we get to the end of this. But welcome.
Hey, this is really fun to be here. And, I have listened to your podcast. I know that usually you do this at 6 a.m.
Yeah, we're usually early.
And so I just want everyone to know that it's on the noon o'clock hour.
Yeah.
I'm just not an early bird. So I don't know if Todd was just like, all right.
Yeah.
Heidi, you don't have to come early. Because I just it's just, maybe if you got me around like 2 or 3 in the morning, that's when I'm really good.
That's when it's right when you're getting ready to go to bed, right? Yeah, no, thank you for being here. Yeah, and it is the noon hour, and I don't mind doing it at noon. I just like starting the day off early and getting things rolling. But
for sure.
So I'm just grateful that you're willing to do this.
Yeah, this is cool.
So cool. Well, why don't we start off by letting our listeners know a little background, like where you grew up, a little bit about your family.
Okay, I grew up just super not far from where we are right here.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't know. You grew up right around this area.
Yeah, just down the road as well.
So do you remember before Smith's?
Yes.
Okay, so like just to paint a picture here,
yeah.
Right kind of by us is this street called Bengal Boulevard. And we are actually both Bengals.
Yes,
right?
we are.
We both went to Brighton High.
Bengal power.
And so at the top of Bengal Boulevard is now like this big shopping center with Smith's and Little Caesars. Yeah. But back before that, man, we used to like ride our bikes and snowmobiles and stuff like that in that field.
Yeah, there was nothing there.
And then, man, when we got Little Caesars and we could like bring a can of, do you remember this when you could like bring a can of food and they'd give you crazy bread?
Oh yeah.
We would like walk to Little Caesars. That was the best when that happened. Anyway, so yeah, I grew up right around here. And my family is my very best friends.
Right.
My parents are amazing family people.
Right.
My dad owned his own business, and my mom worked for him.
Oh, okay.
And I'm the oldest, and then I have 3 siblings that were younger than me.
Okay.
There were 2 boys and 2 girls, 2 blondes and 2 brunettes.
Oh, really?
So,
how was it being the oldest?
I just really felt picked on mostly. I always like to tell my siblings now, I used to have to clean all 3 of the bathrooms. Do you remember that? Like,
That's not fair.
I had to do everything, I feel like. And my parents really, and I can appreciate this now, but when I was young, my parents didn't hand me anything.
Right.
They didn't, they just really believed in hard work.
Right.
In fact, we kind of joke in our family because my dad would like make up stuff that was work. So we'd like have to move the wood pile from the side of the house up onto the balcony.
Right.
And then we'd have to move that. And we had this area that just would get rampant weeds. And we'd be like, can you just put in some sod or some rocks or some wood chips or do something? And he wouldn't, because he wanted us to weed it.
Wanted something to do.
Yeah. It was awful, So
that's funny.
I come from a also super creative family. And so just in terms of a little bit of background, because people often ask me if like, when did I know I was an artist, or what my art background is, because I'm in this very creative field. And my answer is always that I'm actually not an artist. And so in my mind, like, an artist is somebody who like has that blank canvas and can just like paint some amazing painting, and that's not me. And so I just didn't consider myself an artist. In fact, so interestingly enough, my paternal grandfather was an artist by profession.
Oh, okay.
And my dad was super resentful of his artist lifestyle. He was resentful that he wasn't making the money that he, like
kind of more of a carefree.
My grandpa's very much of a like, make it do without kind of a guy, very, very amazingly creative, loved photography. And back in those days, one of my favorite stories about my grandpa was that he would make homemade Christmas cards every year. and back in that day, it was just like, there was no Kinko's, right? You didn't have a printer. So he would screen print them, or he would carve into a tile and do like these multiple layered tile prints. Like, he was just a creative genius, mastermind. And he would go all out on holidays and create these things that he'd like put up on the roof of the house, like these big wood cutouts of Santa. And he just loved that visual life. And my dad just didn't connect to that at all. So when I was young, my dad told me no art classes. We don't take art classes. You need a skill. You need to graduate with something that you can actually support yourself.
That's why he was making you move the wood pile.
Yeah. And so I actually never took an art class.
Interesting.
I to fulfill my art credit, I took pottery.
Okay.
And I did have a pot win state. So
that's good.
So that is an art class. Super creative.
Did you find yourself like where you really wanted to, and did you even maybe resent that at all?
No,
that you couldn't
I didn't
do that?
care.
Okay, you didn't care.
I didn't care. I wasn't. Okay. I didn't have any affinity for it. The only thing that I had an affinity for that was artistic was handwriting.
Okay.
Which, I was just fascinated with hand lettering. And, I had certain pens that I loved. I loved to doodle.
Okay.
Handwriting. And all my friends would tell me, "Oh, you have such cute handwriting." Da, 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 da. And I would work on my handwriting. So this was important to me for whatever reason. Yeah. And so interestingly enough, like, and I'll loop back to the handwriting situation because it's super interesting. It's funny how it played out. But the other component in my family was that we were scrapbookers. So much so that I just thought everybody was scrapbookers.
Okay.
We had...
That's what everyone does.
Yeah. We had... there were scrapbooks of my mom when she was young. There were scrapbooks of my parents before they got married. My mom had been living on semester abroad and had this huge, gorgeous, amazing scrapbook that I loved to look through because she was living in Europe. And when she was living in Europe, she was actually writing to my dad, who's in the Philippines in the military. And their entire courtship was via letters.
Okay.
So there's this album that's their letters and their photos of them living these two separate lives, but falling in love. And I just loved it so much. Wow. And so then, and I was the oldest grandbaby on my dad's side, the oldest granddaughter on the other side. So like there were scrapbooks of me.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I knew how I honestly,
it kind of fades over the years sometimes.
It can, right? I felt so loved and so important.
Yeah.
And a lot of my, like me being able to prove everybody's love for me was in these scrapbooks.
Yeah.
Like, what they wrote about me in the scrapbooks and how excited people were and the gifts people that would give me, my aunts and uncles. And I just, I knew I was important.
Right. Wow. And
so for me, scrapbooking was just part of our life.
Right.
In fact, so when I turned 12, I had these 4 siblings, and at age 12, my 2 little brothers were in an accident.
Oh, okay.
This was a snow accident up in Park City. We were staying in a cabin just a couple of days after Christmas. And I mean, you could attest this. Like when we were young, we got a lot of snow.
Oh, we did. So much more than we do now.
Like crazy. And Park City.
Yeah.
You would go up there and it would be over your head.
Oh, yeah.
As a kid.
Oh, yeah. I totally remember that. I say that to my kids all the time. You have no idea the snow we used to get.
Right. And so we were up there staying at this cabin, and it was an A-frame cabin, and my brothers were outside hitting the ice. That there was this wall of ice from the bottom of the cabin to the ground.
Right.
That had been formed from
just formed over. Yeah.
And it was probably 8 inches thick, this wall of ice.
Wow.
And this happened in the morning. They're out there just like trying to chip away the ice.
Yeah.
And kind of triggered an avalanche of the snow off the top of the cabin.
Oh, yeah.
And this wall of ice actually trapped them. And we couldn't get them out. And so one of my brothers, the youngest, who was 6 at the time, was completely buried. And the other one, who was 9, was buried from his like waist down. Mm-hmm. And so he was screaming for help. And of course he was in shock, and we didn't know where my other little brother was. And so it was quite some time before they were able to dig him out. Oh, and so at age 6 on New Year's Eve, he passed away. Wow. And
how old were you at this time?
I was 12.
You were 12.
And at this point I was just starting to really like understand what it meant to like believe in God and to pray and to go to God to ask for help. And at that time I really thought, no problem. I'm going to pray that he's going to be okay.
Yeah. And
Jesus can fix this because he's a God of miracles.
Yeah.
And I really, my little belief system.
Yeah. As a 12-year-old, you would believe that. Yeah. I mean, I can see why you would believe that. Yeah.
I could not believe he died when I was praying.
Right.
Wow. My parents definitely went into pretty serious shock. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I was the oldest. And I had little siblings.
Yeah.
And my mom wasn't super functioning.
Right.
And I kind of just stepped up, and that, that's just kind of what I did. And I just wanted her to come back to being herself.
Right.
She was sad.
Yeah.
So it took about a year, and I remember the day that she came home with this scrapbook from Hallmark, and it was this album that said Superstar on the front, and she had this enormous stack of Mrs. Grossman stickers, which doesn't mean anything to you, but that was like Mrs. Grossman stickers. That was.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And for a year, our dining room table was the hub of this scrapbook. And it took my mom about a full year.
Right.
And the photos were out on the table and in process going into this album for a year.
For a year. Wow.
And we would gather often, looking at pictures, telling stories, laughing, crying, remembering.
Yeah.
So this album was this huge part of our healing. And for me, that was just what we did.
Yeah.
Like I said. And so
yeah,
that's really where my scrapbooking was born.
Really?
I just was always a scrapbooker. I remember getting like my own disc camera when I was in 8th grade, taking it to girls' camp.
Disc camera.
Like, right. I mean, I love that. And so fast forward a few years, I...
Well, can I go back just a little bit? So it's interesting that, you said that when you saw your scrapbooks and you saw the time and the effort that went into making those, that you felt so loved.
I did.
And then this happens to your little brother, and you guys are, meeting around this table often, and you're putting together and you're talking about stories, and as it was almost kind of like this therapeutic process.
Oh, huge.
And so here you have these two different things. I felt so loved, and here we are working through something very difficult as a family. And it was all around these scrapbookings, and it's so cool in the sense, and the reason in my mind is that's when you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do.
Except I didn't know it was
maybe not then. Maybe not then. I know,
right,
but it's interesting how that would probably, planted the seed of what you're doing today.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I felt so much connection. In fact, one other story that I tell a lot, kind of a side note, is that as the oldest daughter, I felt like my parents were pretty hard on me.
Right.
And I didn't always really I didn't always like my mom.
Right.
And my dad was the type that you don't just sit on the couch. Right. And so if he caught you sitting on the couch, boy, that guy could come up with something for you to be doing like this quick. Right. So I used to hide.
Really?
Okay. So there was this one place where I would hide just so they wouldn't see me and put me to work.
Right.
And it was kind of behind the couch, and we had like a couch table, and that's where the scrapbooks were. And I had a lot of resentment for my mom as a preteen. Well, I struggled because I just we just didn't totally connect.
Right.
And I respected her. I was a little afraid of her, I think, and and she ran a tight ship. Yeah. And we're not alike. My mom is very order, like so organized.
Yeah.
So and I just was super free spirit,
right.
just I could not ever get my act together. And that, at least that's how my perception was. And so I mentioned the scrapbook that was of her on her study abroad. And when I looked at that scrapbook, she seemed so fun. And she was with her friends and wearing these short skirts and tall boots and this funky haircut. And she would write about the boys that she was dating and all this stuff. And it was just so I really connected with the girl.
Right.
That she was there and had a harder time connecting with her as my mom. And so I really felt like that scrapbook kind of bridged a gap for us.
Gotcha.
A little bit. And so, photos and memories and stories were just it was just part of the culture in our family to tell stories. And I continue to really, really love that.
Yeah.
So, I graduated from high school and I really wanted to go to medical school. That was my plan. And I know, so I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we get this thing called the patriarchal blessing. Okay. And that happens around the time you're a teenager. Okay. And it's this blessing. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. And it's really designed to just kind of give you some guidance in your life.
Kind of like a roadmap almost. Yeah.
And up until the time I was 17, I was very driven. I was working in a lab at the U of U. I was going to these women in science symposiums. I was taking like AP math and AP chemistry and AP, I was going to just go for the gold. And I didn't care if women weren't supposed to have, I wanted to be a doctor. And I get this patriarchal blessing, and it just, there's one line. I'm going to share this line that says,
Sure.
You will become a specialist in a field which you may not expect, but which will allow you to serve your fellow men and God.
Wow.
And I was ticked because I was like, what?
Yeah.
No, don't take this, no. I don't, this is what I'm,
Yeah, right.
And at that time in my 17-year-old brain, I just felt completely derailed.
Right.
And then I had to rebel against God and keep going. Because I was like, well, no, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
You can't tell me I'm not going to do it. And I was just really in opposition of maybe what I felt like I was supposed to do and not knowing.
Yeah.
And probably just like everybody is at that age, what am I going to do? And
right. Everyone's trying to figure it out.
So I went to a few years of college. I went to BYU for a couple of years. And quite frankly, I didn't super love BYU. So I transferred up to the U.
Okay.
And I actually really loved going to the U.
Go Utes, huh?
I guess you can't take the Utes out of the, anyway.
Right. Yeah.
And then I decided that I need to serve a mission. So,
okay.
At age 21, I went and served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Portugal. Anyway, pretty hardcore experience that we could have talks about.
Can only imagine, yeah.
And I actually got hit by a car. So once I'd been out for 12 months, I got hit by a car. I had to have this massive surgery.
Really?
I got staph infection.
Wow.
I had to have another massive surgery. And so then I wound up coming home from my mission 4 months early.
Okay.
Against everything that I tried to stay.
Right.
And wound up pretty quick getting married to the guy that I'd been
kind of seen before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
you were disappointed coming home.
I was.
Yeah. You're I want to finish this out.
I was ticked.
But it sounds like things were pretty scary.
My leg wasn't healing.
With your
I had a broken leg. I wasn't healing.
Yeah.
So it was time to come home. We got married and kind of finished our schooling and actually left school to pursue a job before I finished school.
Okay.
So I do not have a completed education in any of my pursuits, which, maybe someday. But so we started going off. We were kind of on this pathway that we were going to do my husband's family business and really invested in that and started having children. And then scrapbooking really kicked up again. Okay.
Yeah, because you got kids now.
Yeah. And I was just obsessed with them. So
I remember my wife would get with her friends, and this is when my kids were younger, and they would go on a Friday night and they'd stay up the entire night.
Exactly.
And even all the way through, halfway through Saturday before they'd finally go get some sleep.
And then you're just trashed.
And they're just trashed for the weekend. But they did that. My wife did that a lot. And I think back then it was the thing to do.
Yeah. It was the best. I remember that. And I kind of found myself with these kids and feeling super overwhelmed and struggling with connection and struggling with who am I? This is a disaster. These always a mess, never getting caught up, just feeling like complete waste. They didn't like the food that I make. They didn't, whatever. I was just really as a young mom wondering what I'd gotten myself into.
Right.
And I really found joy in scrapbooking. I found joy in the photos. I got good at taking photos of them. And I started to pursue scrapbooking, which, going back to the whole specialist in a field which you may not expect, I was like, well, it's a good thing you didn't, spell it out for me, because I would have been really offended by that, probably.
Right.
I thought it was, I really thought it was pretty nerdy.
Right.
scrapbooking thing, but I loved it.
Yeah.
Like I was super into it. And so I started teaching classes. And the first class that I was asked to teach was a handwriting class. And
which you loved.
which is what I loved,
Yeah.
and is how I connected. And I really just felt like the most important thing was that we told our stories on our scrapbook pages, that we actually wrote the story behind the photo. And people hate their handwriting. And so they don't want to write on the page because they've made something beautiful, and then they don't want to.
I'm one of those. I have to type everything.
And so I would work to try to get people to love their handwriting, to improve their handwriting enough that they didn't hate it. And so I would develop classes and write articles for magazines, and then I got an opportunity to start designing products, and like just kind of one thing after another. And it certainly wasn't like I didn't have a ton of support from my husband in the beginning. He was like, could you maybe like make dinner? Or, my scrapbook stuff would be all over the kitchen, and he'd be like, so no dinner, probably. It'd be like home from a 12-hour day at work and just
guess it's pizza tonight.
Be like wondering what's going on here. But the more I got into, the more I loved it. I loved the connection. I loved getting together with the women and telling stories about our kids, realizing we weren't alone, needing each other to get through it. I started to join, at that time it was email groups. We didn't have the internet yet.
Right.
And so we would email each other pictures of our projects and get ideas from each other, share ideas, encourage each other. And the biggest deal was to like get into the magazine, and so that was cool. But pretty soon I found myself with my own signature line of scrapbook products, traveling all over the world, from South Africa to Australia, all over the States, Canada, Europe, teaching people how to scrapbook. And I was just like, this is weird.
Like, how did this happen?
Yeah. Yeah. Not an artist, not, what am I doing here? And I loved it. And I just loved watching people understand how important their stories were and how much value there was in the tiniest details of their story.
Right.
And how much we can honor our family members and the life that we live and the things that we're grateful for on these scrapbook pages. And I got good at speaking. I got good at making presentations and learning computer skills, and there was a lot of ancillary skills that I was learning.
Yeah.
Then we had to do websites and blogs and all these other things, and pretty soon I was really an expert in all kinds of things that didn't even exist just years before.
Right.
And the evolution was happening really fast.
Rapidly, yeah.
But I was a real scrapbooker. I really told the stories of what, when you get into the magazines, they wanted the projects to look a certain way. And so they would give you a photo and tell you to make up a story or, something like that. And I wouldn't do that. I really love to tell the story. And, back in these days, you would get the magazine and you started to know the people because you read their stories that they wrote on their pages, right? And, this is really going to sound dorky, but when you got the magazine, you would get a magnifying glass. So you could actually read what they had written on their scrapbook.
On their scrapbook page, right.
Right, because the page would kind of be small on the magazine page. So you would need to really zoom in. Right. Because we couldn't zoom then. And in that way, you really learned about these people.
Yeah.
And their families and where they vacationed and how they decorate their house and the birth stories and, all these things. And I was also sharing my family's story.
Right.
And as each child would come, I would talk about them. And in my stories, just like I felt was really modeled to me by my grandparents and my parents.
Yeah.
The things that I wrote on the scrapbook pages about my kids were probably not the things that I was telling them like in our day-to-day conversation.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sadly enough, my conversations went with my kids in real life. Pick up your shoes, finish your dinner. It's time for bed.
Yeah.
Get your stuff picked up.
Yeah.
These are kind of our conversations that I was having with my kids. Where on my scrapbooks, I was writing, I love your curiosity. I love to watch you when we go to the park because you do this and this and this, and it's so fun to watch you make friends. Like I would just narrate their life on the scrapbooks, but I wasn't really telling them what I loved about them in real life.
Right.
Because I was too busy being like a hard A
mom. Right. Yeah.
Kind
of like how your dad was.
Yeah. I was
right.
A little exact replica.
Yeah.
I wanted them to do exactly what I said when I said it.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do. Right. And so,
when did you realize that you weren't telling these amazing things to them? I mean, did it hit you early on or later or?
Oh, I think I knew.
Okay. You knew as you were going along.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that I definitely probably used my scrapbooks as a crutch. Like I knew that information was there, right? They knew that I loved them in the scrapbooks. Even though maybe I had a hard time communicating what I loved about them and how special they were in our daily life. So one super quick story, and I probably should watch our time.
Yeah, we're we'll let's finish this and then we'll I want to talk about Cory.
Okay. So quick, this is a super quick story that when I first got pregnant, it was hard for me to get pregnant. And so my first child, I made this entire pregnancy journal about him. And it was very detailed and very wonderful. And we were so excited.
Right.
Fast forward to a punk 13-year-old kid. And I was struggling with him a lot. Right. This is my oldest child. Kind of a little bit hard time getting on the same page for sure. He's not super nice to his siblings. Just kind of the tail that wagged the dog in our family, as I like to say. At one point, he ran across this journal and wound up reading the entire journal because I think he was also getting out of some work at the time.
Right.
And a couple hours later, he came to me and he looked at me and he kind of had these little tears in his eyes, which was rare.
Right.
And he said, "I didn't know you loved me so much."
Wow.
And of course, my response was, "What do you mean? How can you not know that I love you? I do everything for you.
Yeah.
Don't be ridiculous. I make your food. I clean your clothes.
Yeah.
I bought you a bike." But it wasn't until he read my words before I even knew him.
Right.
It was his story. It was his truth. It was real.
Yeah.
It was undisputable.
Yeah.
And he didn't know that. And so probably that was my slap in the face of, okay, so maybe I'm not doing a great job of letting my kids know how I really feel about them on a daily basis.
I think a lot of us fall in that trap with I know they know.
Right.
But then when it comes right down to it, they, on a lot of levels, maybe they don't. Or
we just think that because we got them an Xbox or we bought them new school clothes, that automatically that conveys this love.
Exactly.
So the scrapbooks were really important to me.
Wow, yeah. I can see why.
From that standpoint. And that was the message that I would teach when I
think that's why you've been so successful, because that's what an approach to do. It's like how you no, we're writing the story down. You're not just putting a picture on. What's the story behind it, and really get into it, kind of thing. I love that. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense now as you've gone through what you just shared, how amazing that can be.
So I have these 5 kids, and by now, and I'm kind of talking about this as my kids started to get older.
Yeah.
I was a busy mom, traveling a little bit for business, always scrapbooking, always working on a project, always a million things going on.
Yeah, right.
And my kids loved the scrapbooks. They loved reading what I wrote about them. They would kind of do these tally marks like, oh, okay, you did 2 scrapbook pages about her. Where, how many photos am I in? You know, that it was like this competition type thing. And so I had to be very fair. And the little kids are easier to scrapbook than the bigger kids, you know, and but I will say nothing made me happier than capturing the essence of my kids doing what they do and telling their stories. That I loved that. That was my whole entire jam. For me, being a mom is super hard, and it kind of conflicted with my creative drive and all of my ambitious pursuits. But I felt like I had a really good connection with my kids.
Sure.
And they were always kind of on board and part of all my projects and this and that. We had lived in China for a while. That really kind of bonded us. And anyway, so this kind of gets us to where we were, and I'll go back a few years. So, when my second son, so I have 5 kids. My first 2 kids are boys, and they're only 17 months apart, really close. And so they always were like best friends, worst enemies. Tons of sports,
right?
And not normal sports, like sports that are super dangerous, like hockey and rugby, and you know, like I would just think, can we play a normal sport?
Yeah.
No.
Right.
They were daredevils, very active. You know, moms will talk about, I hear people, and now more prevalent, video games are so much more prevalent now than even they were 5 or 6 years ago.
Sure.
But my kids wouldn't have sat down and played a video game for anything. They had to be like doing backflips off the fence or making jumps or rollerblading, skateboarding, very outdoorsy.
You're right.
People. Cory is my second oldest.
Second oldest, okay.
And was always my, just always concerned about me, protective of me, very much tenderhearted, very much friends of everybody's friend.
Okay.
Funny.
Right.
Happy, charming to a fault, like just.
Right.
In fact, people that he didn't like thought that they were like his best friends.
Really?
He just really knew how to make people feel so comfortable, and he would never be mean to somebody. He may say something. I won't say he never said anything behind people's back or whatever, but he tried to he was a kind person. I don't think he even had to try. It was just
who he was.
Him.
Yeah.
And he also kind of flew under the radar. Like, he didn't make a lot of fuss. He ate whatever you gave him. He wore whatever you gave him. He did whatever you told him. It just wasn't a fight. Nothing was ever a fight. And he wasn't a stellar student and wasn't an exceptional athlete, but he did everything, played everything, participated in everything.
Yeah.
And everybody liked him, so it was always great to have him around.
Sure.
In 9th grade, we moved around schools a little bit, and I noticed a really severe drop in grades, like from kind of your averagey, high average to like all Fs.
So.
And I was like,
big swing there, yeah.
No siree, not in this household.
Right.
You know, and the really structured mom and me laid down the gauntlet on this kid. Like, that's it. No friends, no nothing until these grades are under control. quarter 2, all Fs. And I've now taken away everything.
Right.
And
how old is he at this point?
9th grade.
He's 9th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So then I start realizing that maybe there's something wrong, because he's not wanting. I mean, he's very uncomfortable with the situation, very unhappy. And I'm like, I'm going to the teachers, what's happening? And they're like, well, he's great in class. So it was like, okay, is he just not turning stuff in? Is he not completing? Right. What's going on? There was kind of a combination of everything. We'd kind of scramble at the last minute and get things up to passing. And that 9th grade year was just really, really hard.
Yeah.
And he, at that time, I got him into some couple different counselors, and he was diagnosed with some depression. But he didn't seem depressed. Like, he was still funny, making everybody laugh.
Yeah.
Still doing all the things he did. Still himself. Like, I was like, well, I thought depressed people just laid in their bed the whole day.
Yeah.
Just doesn't make sense.
Right.
And I was still riding pretty hard. So we made some deals. He switched to a different school. And it was like, okay, I'll let you make the switch and do this thing if you get good grades and if,
hold up your end of the bargain kind of thing. Yeah.
And he did pretty good. For the first semester, wound up kind of getting into trouble with drugs. At the beginning of the second semester. This is his sophomore year now. And I tell this story, I share this because this is where my regret starts to really kick in.
Sure.
Cory got busted for smoking pot on a school activity. And he didn't get caught. He confessed.
Okay.
There was some things kind of fishy about it, but I was like, the level that I freaked out at was so high. Like, my absolute losing it I mean, if there was a scale of 10 being the absolute highest you could freak out, I was like at a 14.
Wow.
I was not having it.
And you had obviously no clue that was an issue up until that point, or did you have an idea?
I think that we were worried. We were wondering his grade,
what's
struggling,
going on?
Trying to catch him in something, wondering if there was some solution to what was going on, asking him point blank, no, denying it, whatever. And so I lost it, and he felt beyond horrible. If being horrible, if one was the most horrible that you could feel, he probably felt it like a negative 20.
Right.
He was sick for letting me down, letting my husband down.
Yeah.
Going against this policy that was certainly like an understanding in our family.
We're not doing drugs in our family, kind of thing. Yeah.
And so he got suspended. He got suspended for 45 days, which is what you get when you share drugs with somebody, even if the person you shared it with denies using.
Oh, okay.
But that was his confession.
Gotcha.
So we went on home and hospital, and this is about 5 months before Cory took his own life. And during that time, we started some counseling and some therapy, and I was still in this very hard A mom role.
Right.
In that time, I was really trying to I thought I was really trying to understand him and understanding what was wrong and understanding depression, understanding, because I'm thinking to myself, dude, what do you have to be sad about? Can you just tell me one thing that you have in your life?
It's like you have all these blessings. Why could you even be sad kind of thing? Yeah.
Also, that is another big regret that I have. Don't don't say that.
Right.
So if you're keeping notes, number 1, don't forget. Number 2, don't question how could they can possibly feel the way they do.
Yeah.
That's called shame-based parenting.
Yeah. Yep.
But this kid had so much going for him. Everybody loved this kid.
Yeah.
He was so fun. Anyway, there was a lot of different dynamics that were kind of piled onto this already messy, hard situation for him. In relationships, I noticed on Twitter his bio, or his little self-description, said professional disappointment.
Really? Wow.
And he just kind of felt like he'd let me down and my husband down and our family down and everybody, God, to the point that, I knew he was really troubled about that. But he also wasn't capable himself of picking himself up and brushing himself off, and which I couldn't understand.
Yeah.
Also because I didn't have depression.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't see it. I didn't understand it. I couldn't relate to it. I couldn't empathize with him. I was very frustrated and discouraged. So, when there's a suicide, easily the worst part of the suicide is that there are no answers.
Right.
You just get left with question after question after question, and then those questions have babies and those questions have babies,
It just keeps going. Yeah.
And because it was so unexplainable to me, I would find myself creating false realities that would support a decision like suicide.
Yeah.
Cory had never attempted suicide. He had never threatened suicide. He had never vocalized being suicidal. In fact, I really thought we had turned a corner. I really thought like things were better.
Starting to move.
It was in the
direction.
summer, so school wasn't really an issue. He had a job. He had just got his driver's license. He had a new skateboard.
Yeah.
Like
all these things that kids want at the time.
Right. Yeah. I thought we were good.
Yeah.
There were some things that were going on that day that certainly, maybe looking back now, could have been a trigger, or maybe I should have seen, or I should have understood more leading up to that. But I didn't. And so we were 100%, I felt 100% blindsided by this decision that he made.
Right.
And my level of devastation I took this so personally.
Right.
That it just really, speaking for myself, it just shook me to my very core.
Yeah.
As I tried to figure out, like particularly the day that Cory had been declared dead,
circumstances were that Cory was not dead when first responders came.
Okay.
Um,
There's a tissue behind you too, by the way. Sorry. Yeah.
And so Cory was in a really, his body was very healthy to be a donor. And so they were working really hard to utilize his organs that were very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so at this time, Cory had tweeted goodbye. And news had spread, and we were trying to decide how we were going to handle this.
Right.
And as a storyteller, as a scrapbooker, as somebody that had this following that knew Cory, that knew my story, like, I was entertaining lies. I was trying to create something that seemed reasonable, that I could tell.
Yeah, I bet that would, I can't even imagine.
Because saying out loud that he had taken his life was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I thought we had a happy family.
Yeah.
I thought that we had a good family. But this doesn't happen to good families or good moms or good dads. This only happens to horrible people. And I just, everything that I believed about what we had was pretty shattered.
Yeah.
But my husband and I looked at each other and we decided that we were gonna be honest, and that we were gonna tell this story. I don't even know if at that time I knew how important that decision was. Because, like, it could have been an accident.
Right.
I mean, I was really afraid of what people were going to think about me and about Cory and about our family, and the exact opposite of what I thought happened.
Yeah.
By doing that, I really opened the door for people to just support us and love us.
Yeah.
And let us know that we weren't alone in these struggles and in suicidal thoughts and suicidal situations.
Yeah.
The depression and anxiety was not unusual.
Right.
I honestly didn't know how many people were affected, how many people's lives were touched by suicide, how broad of a situation, a problem that we were really dealing with at that time. And it gave me, like, having people connect with me and reassure me was a big deal.
Yeah, that connection piece is powerful. And I want to point out to our listeners too is, the amount of vulnerability we're willing to express is the level of happiness we'll end up experiencing in life. And by you guys saying, we're just going to tell the truth, as hard as that is, and I'm my heart just aching over here, but because of that, look what's happened. Because like you said, the exact opposite happened. All this outpouring of people who've been through it and that can relate, and the connections you started to form because of this. I mean, that's, probably one of the things you can look back on is what's made you get through it up to this point even.
And I would say that was true. People were telling me that this opened up this door for them to have a conversation with their kids.
Yeah.
That is so vitally important. I had never had that conversation with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had this realization that what I had been doing my kids' entire lives of telling their stories and scrapbooking, was not maybe as nerdy
Right.
as I maybe kind of thought it was. I became so thankful for every single photo.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of photos and a lot of scrapbooks.
I can
And
imagine.
I wish I had more.
Yeah. Right.
I found very quickly how important it was to talk about Cory
Yeah.
and to tell his stories and memories was what strengthened our family. Training my kids how to talk about
Yeah.
Cory and not shut down and feel the sadness. We felt it together. We felt it openly. We shared how we felt about it.
Yeah.
But at that time, I think probably for me to tell you that I was shattered, like that was the ultimate humbling
Yeah.
of any of the hard, humbling experiences that I've had.
Yeah.
And I'm not like exempt. Like I've had things that I thought were hard.
Sure. Sure.
I wanted to know what I could have done different.
Yeah.
And some people would say, Heidi, there's nothing that you could do different. And you know what? I do think that we can do better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe we can do better in our relationships, in our families, in our parent-child relationships.
Right. I agree.
In all of our close relationships, I think we can do better. And there's that quote by Maya Angelou. I don't know if I can say it right, but it says something about you have to forgive yourself for the things that you didn't know
Yeah.
until you learned them.
Until you learn them. Yeah.
And I kind of repeat that to myself a lot. Because I do believe that some of the behaviors that I had as a parent magnified the problems that Cory felt, or heightened them. Like I was not in my anger and in my wrath and in my this is how we do it, which was just who I was. That's what I thought. That's what I believed my responsibility as a parent was to do.
Right.
Was to be mad when your kids did something that they weren't supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so
that's a way to show them that's the wrong thing, and they'll learn from this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did that. So in the past 3 years, it's been 3.5 years since Cory passed away, and my response has been to go to work on myself.
Wow.
That losing Cory was like I really had to look at myself in the mirror.
Yeah.
Obviously, I as a mom, you're supposed to keep your kids safe, and I felt like I'd failed there. And I say that gently, like
Right.
I had done everything that I believed and knew to keep him safe, and I tried everything to help him.
Right.
So based on the information that I had at that time,
Yeah, you did the best with what
I
you
did
knew.
what I could.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that Cory knew he was loved. But sometimes we say things like this, like, you just got to love him. And that, like, when people would say that, you just got to love him, that kind of hurt
Yeah.
me a little bit, because I would think, oh, so do you think maybe I just didn't love him enough? Like,
Yeah.
no. We do have to love him, but also we have to somehow find a language that exists with words, with behaviors,
Yeah.
and with actions that adequately communicates love in the form of acceptance,
Yeah.
forgiveness, space, options, hope.
Yeah.
And I wasn't good at that yet.
Right.
And I remember saying things like, if you can't pass math and you can't get a good grade on this math test, then how are you going to graduate from high school? How are you going to get in college? How are you
Right.
ever going to get a job?
Right.
How are you going to support a family? You know, and I remember my parents having that same talk with me.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the behaviors that we have as parents, I'm learning, really comes from how we were raised.
How you're raised. Yeah. You're a product of your environment.
Even though,
Yeah.
like, I knew my parents loved me.
Yeah.
And they pushed me and they wanted me to work and they held me accountable. And no, I didn't always love it.
Yeah.
I hid a lot of things from my parents. I didn't
Yeah.
want to get in trouble.
Right.
I would have no more come to my parents and told them that I needed help.
Yeah.
I was going to just toe the line.
Yeah.
So I really think that my message now, my journey, is to try to be open
Mm-hmm.
about about
You're good.
what I think defines a really healthy relationship between a parent and a child. I used to probably think it was, I'll do your wash
Yeah.
and make you food and take you where you need to go, and you get good grades and do everything I tell you.
Right.
Like, that's what I thought
Yeah.
was a great connection, a great relationship. If you do what I tell you, then we have a good relationship.
Right.
I don't believe that, and that's not how I mean, I'm still evolving.
Yeah. How would you look at it now, though? Like, I know you're still evolving and learning this. How should it look, do you think?
And I'll be very, very cautious in saying this because these are personal, all of our relationships are super personal.
Sure.
But so many of us are very hard on ourselves, myself included. And most of the time, our kids know when they've done something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They know. They know when they need to be better. They actually don't need, like, someone to scream it at them. And so I believe that the relationship, like a really healthy, connected relationship, needs to be one of sharing
Mm-hmm.
and of actual, I'm going to say the word safe, even though I feel like it's a little bit overused. I want my kids to be able to tell me if they've gotten themselves into some trouble.
Right.
And being able to trust that I'm not going to absolutely fling
Right.
off.
Right. They feel
The
safe
handle.
coming to you, going, hey, here's
Yeah.
what I'm dealing with.
Now I know, like, let's be real.
Yeah.
Every kid isn't going to come tell their parents all the things
For
that
sure.
they've done wrong
Yeah.
or snuck out or, this or that or the other. But I want to be somebody that they can talk to about hard things.
Hard stuff. Yeah.
And have a relationship where they know that I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
And I know they're not perfect.
I'm glad you say that because I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with. I'm working with their kid, their daughter, or their son. And I'll say, why haven't you brought this up with your parents? And they're like, my parents have lived a perfect life.
Right.
They won't understand. I've heard that. I can't tell you how many times in my counseling with kids.
Because we put our parents up on a pedestal.
Yeah. It's like, well, they've never done a mistake. They won't understand this. I'm like, well, no, they just have never told you. Trust me, they have. But
Right.
they haven't communicated it. And that's what you're saying, is to have that kind of open communication. We're not perfect. We never were.
Here's
kind
one
of
of the
thing.
biggest revelations that I think that I
Mhm.
had. The therapist that was working with Cory explained to me, no child wants to disappoint their parents.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, well, then why the heck aren't they doing this and this and this? What are you talking about? Yes, they do. They're fine with it.
Yeah.
You know, like that was
Right.
kind of my response, because I was seeing things so black and white.
Yeah.
So yes or no. So
Yeah.
box checky. That's how I saw this parenting job. Did they get up to school? Yes. Did they come in at curfew? Yes.
Yeah.
Did they get good grades? Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
there's nothing box checky about a real relationship
There isn't. Right.
with a child.
Yeah.
And so there's certain things that I've had to learn, which is like taking the time to have a real conversation. And that might not happen when it's convenient for me. And it might not happen in a place that's convenient for me. I might have to stay up later than I wanted to.
Yeah.
Or I might have to give up a project that I wanted to work on, or,
Yeah.
you know, and I have to go into their, like, and people say, I hear this a lot. I lay down in bed with my kids
Yeah.
with the lights off.
Yep.
And have those heart-to-heart
Yeah.
chats.
You know, I got to say something here, because it really hit me when you just said what you said. You know, one of the best definitions I've heard of what love really is it's sacrifice. And here you are saying earlier, you know, I'm washing, I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm taking you here and there. That's sacrifice. But the level of sacrifice you're talking about now is completely on a whole nother level. Like, it's that time piece. It's that quality time. Laying in the bed in the dark, just, hey, how was your day? Tell me about it. I'll tickle your back. I'm here to just lay
Right.
by you. If you don't even want to talk, I'm here. That takes sacrifice, because I know as a parent myself, I got stuff to
You're
do.
tired.
I'm tired. I got stuff to do. I'm going to be over here doing this. And I get caught up in that too. And I think a lot of us do. But that really hit me when you said that, Heidi, that it's a different level of sacrifice that you're talking about here.
Well, and I'm going to go one more level.
Okay.
When a kid tells you that they don't agree with your beliefs that you've taught them,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe this is, and maybe specifically I'm talking about religion, but this could also be like a work ethic. It could
Sure, it could be a lot of things.
friend choices, you know, whatever it is. I wasn't in the business of like letting my kids make their own choices.
Right.
I think,
Yeah.
honestly, I was like, no, you're going to do what I say.
Right.
This is how this works, because I'm the
Yeah.
parent,
Yeah.
right? This is the perk that I have, because I brought you into this earth.
Yeah.
I say how it goes.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was going on in Cory's life is he was really questioning a loving Heavenly Father, a God, and a Savior.
Right.
He just didn't buy it.
Just didn't get in. Yeah. Didn't click
And
with him.
he came to church with us, and he would pray with us. He wasn't in open rebellion, but he was sharing with me that he didn't believe. And this was so hard for me,
Yeah.
because I was like, well, it's obvious here, right here in this scripture, right here in this sunset, right here in this
Yeah.
promise, you know. And for me, there's so much safety in my religious beliefs. But for him, he hadn't gotten there yet. And I was 40 something and he was 15. And why at that point didn't I think to myself, there's time.
Yeah.
There's time. These things are going to work out.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I wanted him to believe my way. I wanted him to do
Right then and there.
I did, because
Yeah.
I thought that there was safety there.
Mm-hmm.
I have had to accept and embrace the fact that my children are little humans
Yeah.
and they're individuals,
Yeah.
and that I get to be a mentor to them. And
Just making sure we're all, yeah, just checking, making sure everything's working.
Anyway,
Sorry about that, Heidi.
that's okay. I get to be a mentor to them, and I
Yeah.
get to support them, but I don't need to control them.
Right.
What I can control is me.
Amen.
And we all know that. We've been told that, like, you can only control yourself. We've been told that. But when you're a parent, oh no, you want to
Yeah.
control these kids too.
It's a whole nother thing.
And your spouse.
Actually doing
You
it.
want
Yeah.
to control them all, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So true.
so when I've had to embrace the fact that as I control me and I become safe
Yeah.
for them, and I become a sounding board, and I become a support.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say one other word that our kids need to see us as an ally.
Yeah. I love that.
And I kind of think I thought I was an ally.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was paying the bills, right? Like,
Yeah.
what better ally could I be? But an ally has your back no matter what.
Yeah.
Even when the chips are super down.
Yep.
They don't throw you to the wolves. You know, they don't give up on you. They don't make you feel worse. They
listen, they understand,
Yeah.
they have empathy, they compassion, that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah.
and so I think that my definitions have just all had to evolve.
Yeah.
And I'm not perfect. I can do a solid freak out. You know, and then I'll just like reverse.
Yeah.
Throw that baby into reverse and
Right.
apologize and acknowledge and recognize and invite
Yeah.
this, you know, and it's hard because I am still who I am, and I
Yeah.
still want the very best for my kids.
Sure.
I want to protect them. If I could just put them in a padded room and
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
I was going to say, I like that recognition part where you go, you know, I am going to make a mistake, but I will catch it and I'll go back and I'll apologize. I mean, I think that in itself is a very, very powerful thing. Because there's times where I've done stuff with my kids and I don't apologize, but I know I was wrong.
right.
Like, why didn't I go say I'm sorry? You know what I mean? Yeah. Powerful.
I also think that, and you mentioned the back tickle.
Yeah.
When you're mad at your kid or disappointed or frustrated, the last thing that you want to do is just sit there and tickle their back and comfort them. You know, you just want to,
Right, right.
I have come to learn that there's no substitute from just taking them up
Yeah. Yep.
and just holding them with that really strong, like, it is going to be okay. It is.
Right.
And tickle and scratch their back and physically be there. That is a reassurance and a connection that kids need and love
Right.
from their parents, especially when they're in trouble or struggling or have made a mistake. And I think Cory gave the best hugs of maybe anybody
Yeah.
except for his dad.
Yeah.
And really miss hugging him.
Yeah.
And so I have kind of evolved into just never missing, you know, that opportunity to kind of give some physical reassurance.
Right.
And that's been an evolution for me too.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot can be said in a hug, right?
Surprisingly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that wasn't the language that I had always subscribed to.
Right. Wow. Wow, Heidi, thank you so much for being so vulnerable with this story. I mean, this is. I mean, my heart goes out to you, but on the other end, I mean, what a powerful story, and I love the part how when you said earlier, this has been a wake-up call to work on me, and that really hit me when you said that, and I love that because it really kind of takes you out of the victim mode when you do that. Like, okay, I'm going to be better because of this. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy, and it doesn't mean I'm still not going to have my really rough and bad days. But to hear you say that, that's where my mind went. I'm like, wow, what a way. And even when you guys said, we're going to just tell the truth around this, we're not going to hide from it. Another way of not playing the victim to it, so to speak. And I just love that, and how, I mean, just how that's allowed you to kind of move forward. I'm sure obviously it's still really, really tough and raw for you.
Yeah.
But I love
I mean, how many times when you have, you're a counselor and you have people drop off their kid,
Yep.
and you know that mom is like, fix this kid.
Oh yeah.
I'll be back in an hour.
Exactly.
Fix him.
Yeah.
You know, that was me dropping off my kid. Like,
Yeah.
I hope we can help him because this kid needs
Right.
help. Like, not really understanding. Oh, so the way that I behave
Mm-hmm.
is affecting the way
It's
he
affecting
behaves.
it. Yeah.
You know, is affecting our
Yeah.
relationship. Oh, so I could be the thing that turns this around. Like, do parents know that?
Yeah.
That what a power that we have as parents
Yeah.
in order to influence this very strong relationship. But we have to be the ones that do it first, that go
Yeah.
first.
Yeah. Yeah. That's powerful. You say that. I had an experience a few weeks ago with a parent who, I do all these things, this and that. I'm like, and they're religious and, that thing. And I said, I'm going to say something to you. It might sting a little bit, but I'm going to say it anyways.
Typical
because,
counselor.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, stop quoting Buddha and be Buddha. Or stop quoting Jesus and be Jesus. And I think, and
That
boy,
does sting a little.
yeah. And it was like a wake up call though, but it's like, I think we're really good at quoting this, that, look, read this, do this, instead of just being what we want them to be. I know we're not perfect, but being like Buddha would be, calm and serene, be like Jesus, loving and open
Right.
arms. And
Right.
instead of thinking, well, no, but this is this, just take a step back and be those things and watch what happens when we do that.
Right.
Anyway, so it's kind of going to what you just said there. And so
Yeah,
it's
I love
just
that.
powerful.
I love that. I think that people will reach out to me or when I
Mhm.
speak or whatever, and they're like, so when is too young to start like using these tools that you talk
Mhm.
about? Or,
Right.
I don't have a teenager yet. And so I'm just kind of putting this up on the shelf and I'm like, okay, no, because you freak out when your kid spills milk.
Right.
You freak out when you hand them back a shake in the car and the shake ends up all over the car,
Everywhere, right.
Then you freak out. And so actually from a young age, kids are expecting you to freak out and scared that you're going to freak out because they don't want to disappoint you at any age.
At any age, yep.
And so kind of that don't freak out is kind of my mantra.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I think that whether it's little things that we freak out about or big things that cause freakouts, nothing really good comes from the freak out.
Right.
It's completely unproductive and it scares everybody and it heightens the emotion
Yeah.
and all those things and yet it really is our first reaction.
Yeah. Right.
One of the things that this coach friend, my Cory therapist taught me was,
Right.
when a first responder comes on the scene of an accident,
Mm-hmm.
what if that first responder was just
Right.
freaking out, like, what have you done here? What's going on? Whose fault is this? And just
Right.
screaming and crazy. how much confidence would you have in that guy?
Right.
You know, you would not have any
Zero.
confidence, right? And so as parents, or even if it's in a spouse relationship or a friendship relationship, when something does go wrong, being able to stay calm puts you in a place of actually being able to help.
Absolutely.
Puts you in a place of influence.
Yep.
Whereas if you freak out, you lose it like that.
Yeah. Wow, that's a very good thing to point out. I agree.
And I just was a really good freaker outer, man. I had that down.
Yeah. Wow. Well, man, we could keep talking
I
forever
know.
here. No, thank you. This is amazing. Real quick though, I want to ask maybe two more questions. What are you doing now to kind of help spread the word, so to speak? I mean, obviously you've gotten a little bit into it, but what are you doing now to kind of reach out to people? I know that you had a huge following, because of your scrapbooking business and this and that, but you're also using that as people are reaching out to you asking for help. And so talk a little bit about that real quick here.
So I do try to share stuff through my social media and be open and remind people how important it is. And always such an amazing support and response to as I talk about that on social media. When Cory first passed away, I was like, oh, I got to start a foundation, or do we have a marathon, or what do we need to earn money? Who do I give the money to?
Right.
What should I do? And I wanted to do something, which I think is a really common feeling when you're like, we got to change this.
Yes.
And it took a while. It took about 2 years, and I decided, I don't think we need more foundations.
Right.
And I don't think we need more fundraising.
Yeah.
I think we need more information.
Oh, I love that.
And so it's been almost a year ago, and I convinced Cory's therapist, who has become a friend of mine and a coach and a mentor to me. He's a marriage and family therapist, and he specializes in suicide prevention and working with teens. And I convinced him to start to work on a podcast with me. And I'd never done a podcast. And of course, I kind of go into this whole thing just feeling like I'm literally the worst example. So
no.
But I was learning so much after Cory died, and having so many like aha moments about what I wish that I would have known.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the time that we started the podcast, I really thought it was going to be a podcast for any parent who has a child struggling with suicide.
Right.
Or attempts or suicidal thoughts or self-harm. What can I do different? I really believe, honestly, that parents have more power than they think in their own behavior.
Right.
If we can realize that, and if we can make some changes, and that those changes will really impact the kids in those behaviors and in the relationship. And that was really just born of what I had been learning. And so I really thought it was going to be just kind of this suicide prevention, this suicide podcast for parents who were just scared. And what it's really turned into is more of a relationship podcast. That's really talking about like how to strengthen the relationships.
I love it.
How to fortify the relationships, and realizing that just because you gave birth to a kid doesn't mean you gave birth to a relationship.
Wow.
And that relationship has to be like built and then built onto and then reinforced, and then like it's ever growing.
Right.
And I don't think I thought that. I thought that the relationship just came with the last name.
Right. Wow. That's
know,
powerful. What is your podcast, and how would someone reach it, start listening to it?
So the podcast is, it's called Light the Fight. And that name really just came to me just right after Cory died, and I wanted to just like change the world and shout it from the rooftops when I first learned about like shame and guilt. And learned that when we shine light on things that are dark and scary, that they lose their power.
Yeah.
And that we can work on them better, that we can understand them more.
Love it.
And so
Love it.
that's the name is Light the Fight, because we do talk about difficult topics.
Yeah.
And I'm the mom that's made all the mistakes. And we're talking to a therapist who has seen all the mistakes.
Right.
And so you kind of get those two perspectives.
Oh, that's awesome. Very cool. Well, if you could end with how could people get a hold of you or reach out to you? I know you're bombarded and you're trying to divvy that out. But just how would they follow you to start getting to know more about you? What would be the best way?
So, yeah, that would be great. If you wanna kind of learn about me, I do have a website that's called HeidiSwapp.com, and you can go there and you can see all the pretty stuff, the memory keeping stuff, and all the things. You can buy some things on there, but
all her creative
really
stuff
it's just
is amazing.
It's just a creative site. Instagram would be a great place for you to connect with me and find me. So I'm just at Heidi Swapp, 2 P's, like a swap meet, but with 2 P's, you know. And then you can also follow Light the Fight. It has an Instagram account.
Great.
And that's a great place to kind of be aware of community events that we do, and information. We teach workshops, and who knows where it's going to go.
Yeah, I think that's actually wonderful. Give people not only you talking about the information, but then they can come and put that information to work for themselves. I love that.
I think, as David, he's my partner on the podcast, has realized that like if people that he's counseling will come to one of our workshop, it will save them like 12 weeks of what they may or may not learn.
In one-on-one
counseling,
yeah.
Because so much of therapy is really learning.
Yep.
It's just education.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think a lot of people think they're going to come in and get psychoanalyzed or something like that, when really we're just learning.
Just learning.
And
wow.
and we
love it.
We just need help. This doesn't come natural. It's not taught in school. It didn't come from our parents. And so we really have to seek the information, because more information, updated, good information is available, but it needs to be, you have to seek it out.
Wow, love it. Awesome. Very cool. Well, Heidi, I want to thank you so much for taking some time today and sitting down and sharing your
thank you.
Your
Thank
amazing
you for
story.
me.
Absolutely. And for being vulnerable and open and honest about your struggles through this whole thing. And I really love that. And I think people really appreciate when people are just real and genuine, like we were talking about before we actually started the podcast, right? So thank you for, being willing to be vulnerable with what you've gone through in the how you've handled it and how you're still learning from it and moving forward,
Well, this is actually the first time I'm meeting you in this podcast. And I was very moved by the podcast that you did with Richard Osler on his podcast.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
About your story. And there's so much value. Like, I learned so much about that dark place and about the struggle that somebody might go through. It helps me so much when somebody sheds light on that place.
Yeah.
And there's things that you said. One of the things that you said is that you feel like your addiction was your greatest blessing.
Yeah.
In that podcast. And I'm not really to a place where I would categorize what's happened as my greatest blessing.
Right.
But nothing has ever pushed me to learn and grow more. Yeah. And I'm thankful for what Cory has been able to teach me.
Yeah.
Because nothing and no one would be able to teach me what I've learned from this. And I love Cory with all my heart, and I want to make him proud.
Yeah.
And I know that he would be happy if his story can help others.
Yeah. I think he's happy right now is my belief. And your story that's going to be shared with my listeners and is going to really make a huge impact. I work with a lot of people who are in the kind of going through the same things, depression and anxiety and trying to find their way through this world. And so this is going to help a lot of people. Heidi, thank you so much. And I really do believe he's happy right now. I really do. I think he's proud of you right now. Hope that's okay for me to say.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm an expert on anything. It's just my gut feeling. But thank you, Heidi. You're amazing. This is our first time meeting, but I feel like I know you really, really well. But you're awesome. Listeners, thank you so much for your time and listening to this. Another amazing podcast. I just sit there and I pinch myself. All these people, I get to sit and listen to their stories. But please share this, especially with those that might be struggling. If you're a parent, this is to be honest, a wake-up call to you to start reaching out and talking to your children. Talk about the tough questions, especially the ones that scare you to ask. Ask them. And it might come across completely weird and awkward and whatever, but at least you asked it and you can get that ball rolling. So it's a wake-up call to you. I want to thank Veracity Networks once again for being our sponsor. They're into helping the community, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of your organization in this way. And again, Heidi, thank you for your time today. It was awesome. You betcha. So till next time, thank you.